Thank you for taking the time to view this orientation video. It is one of several introductory videos that the SFIA is developing in order to provide members and their staff with helpful information about the SFIA Code Compliance Certification Program, including the semi-annual inspections and samplings which are part of the program requirements. This segment addresses the subject of material traceability and related SFIA program traceability requirements. Traceability refers to the ability to link a finished stud or track back to the original steel coil and the supplier from which it was made. While traceability seems to be a relatively simple concept, it does take considerable time and effort to complete satisfactorily. If you're not prepared or your processes are inadequate, it can easily become the most time-consuming part of an inspection or sampling. Problems are often compounded because traceability is required for each sample pulled during an inspection. That means as many as 6 individual traces may be required for every inspection. Each member enrolling in the SFIA Code Compliance Certification Program is required to develop a quality control manual describing how material and product traceability are managed in their production processes. This traceability process, as described in the documentation, will be verified during the inspection. As an SFIA member, note that your QC document may contain additional procedures or steps than those mentioned in this video. That is to be expected because this video only presents an overview of the minimum requirements for the SFIA program. There are several critical steps in the manufacturing process which affect the traceability of the product, starting with the ordering and receiving of the coil from the mill or supplier, followed by the roll forming of the stud or track, and ending with the final product marking and shipment. Remember, traceability refers to the ability to link that finished stud or track back to the original coil and supplier. A key benefit of traceability to the manufacturer is that if a stud or track fails a performance specification or does not meet minimum requirements, then it's possible to identify where the coil came from, possible reasons for the failure, and to identify any other products that may have been produced from that same coil. Appropriate steps can then be taken in order to minimize the chance of any reoccurrence. These additional steps may include marking and segregating the non-conforming material, adjusting your purchasing requirements or procedures, or having a discussion with your supplier. The cornerstone of adequate traceability is the documentation containing key information about the material being used. This documentation may take the form of a PO, a mill cert, or an independent third-party test certificate. Bills of lading and shipping records are not mill certifications and do not contain the information required for this traceability. The key document, as required by the industry standards, must contain the following: an identifying number for the coil, the ASTM standard it meets, either A653 or A1003, the base metal thickness of the material yield and tensile strength, the coating type and coating weight applied to the material. In the event that the coating is an EQ or equivalent coating, the certificate will also need to identify the specific coating type and its metallic content. These documented elements are an important check to ensure that the properties of the coil will enable the production of a finished product that meets the requirements of the SFIA certification program. Another critical element of traceability is member and product marking. The best way to trace a product back to the specific coil is to include an identifier as part of the inkjet markings on individual members. These markings provide a link from the individual products back to production records and then to the coil of steel used to produce that individual member. In order to have an effective and efficient traceability process, there are several key areas to be addressed when producing certified products. It's important to start the traceability process off correctly because, as we mentioned earlier, it can save a lot of time and headaches later. When a coil is received, the mill certificate or test report should be matched to the purchase order and both attached to a completed material receiving report. The coil information is then logged into the facility's record keeping system. At this point, the received and accepted coil may keep the original coil number or be reassigned a new coil number or identifier that conforms to the system requirements for that facility. When a coil is pulled for production, it should be documented on the production paperwork. Production records should have a place to record the coil number, along with additional information such as the operator's name, number of pieces manufactured in the run, the work order number, and any quality checks performed during the production. According to program requirements, traceability documentation must be retained for a minimum of 2 years. The documentation may be retained in electronic, hard copy, or a mixed format. This documentation should be accessible during an inspection if necessary. Now let's take a look at how traceability works as part of the inspection process. Keep in mind that this traceability will be part of every inspection and sampling performed for you as a member in this SFIA program. When the inspector arrives at your facility, a workspace should be made available which will allow for the verification of the quality control manual and other administrative aspects of the inspection. When your quality control documents have been reviewed, you will be asked to escort the inspector to the production and inventory areas where finished framing products are available for random selection. While examining the production and inventory areas, your inspector will randomly select 3 samples of each type of product being certified at your facility, structural and/or non-structural. The inkjet on the product will be checked and verified to match the product being sampled. Please note that the inspector should be taking photos of the full inkjet markings at this time because this data is critical. A photo eliminates potential typing or handwriting errors. Later, during the inspection, this inkjet information will be verified to the trace documentation, mill cert, or test results. A photo has saved many an error from being made. Inkjet information is also used in completing the labels applied to the samples which are sent to the lab for testing. At this time, multiple dimensional checks will be made and recorded on each selected item. The sample pieces will be measured, marked, and cut for sending to the lab for testing. The inspector will record the complete inkjet marking. However, the coil number is the key piece of information needed for traceability. A copy of the production sheet needs to be obtained which contains the coil number or identifier for the original coil used in making the product. This document is necessary in order to link the produced product to the specific coil information. Back in the office or work area, the production sheet information is then linked to the test or mill cert documentation that traces to the original coil noted on your production records. If that information is easily accessible, traceability can be a short, simple process. However, if production or coil information is incorrect, not handy, or if the information isn't clearly available, then this process can be very time-consuming and frustrating. If it is not possible to trace the final product back to the coil, a notice of deficiency or variance will be issued for that sample. You will be asked to submit a plan to revise or correct your systems so as to enable traceability. However, the product in question is still retained and tested to the specifications on the inkjet, even though the inkjet information was not able to be verified. The documented trace information for each of the samples selected should be submitted along with the inspection materials. In many cases, hard copies of the trace paperwork may be marked and placed in the package along with the samples to be sent to the lab for testing. Thank you for your attention and interest in the traceability requirements for the SFIA steel framing program. Do not hesitate to contact the SFIA with any questions, concerns, or help in meeting any of the requirements for this program.